want to show this part of your conversation with Dennis Prager.
The left isn't a monolith. There's a lot of disagreement on the left. There's certainly a lot of disagreement on things that I say on this show on various issues, even when it comes to crime. I'm sure you've noticed some of the backlash I've received in that regard as well. However, I will say there is a reason why the right wing tends to be more open to having these kinds of discussions and debates, and the left wing gets a little uneasy about it. And it's because there has been this prevalence of prominent figures who identify as the left, right, or on the left, who then later start to, cozy up to right-wing figures, and then it turns out that they completely move to the right wing because they're essentially paid to do it. They're used as tools by the right wing to essentially spew right-wing talking points while purporting to still be on the left. In fact, Dave Rubin's a great example of that. Dave Rubin used to work with us. He identified as someone on the left. Yeah, go ahead.
Forgive me, Anna. Dave Rubin made a video for PragerU, Why I Left the Left.
Oh, I know.
He does not, in fact, state to the world that he's still on the left. I don't know who you have in mind, so I can only address the one name that you gave. Dave Rubin acknowledges he's not on the left.
It's interesting because if I recall correctly, you had a conversation with Dave Rubin and how incredibly important it was that he was engaging in these discussions with you, discussions with the right wing. And you stated something very specific. I actually want to go to that video and I want to get your thoughts. Maybe you can elaborate on what you meant in this video. Let's watch.
I want you to continue to say you're a liberal because you're of great use to good values.
Well, don't worry, I'm not doing it for your use of me. I'm doing it for myself.
No. It's like Christians who say to me, oh, we would love you to come to Christ, but you are so valuable to us as a Jew when you defend us Christians. Yeah. And they're right. You are valuable in the best sense of the word because America needs people who are clearly liberal and to be honest, and fall into the category of kosher as gay. Yeah. To say, hey, hello, the conservatives are not hate mongers. Hello, they should be heard. And maybe every so often you should read National Review, right, or watch a PragerU video.
So, Mr. Prager, you can understand why members of the left would feel a little uneasy when these discussions take place, because usually it's a sign that someone on the left got lured in with some billionaire cash, like Dave Rubin did.
Okay, well, that's an unfair statement. I don't accuse people on the left of having their positions because of money, and I don't think you should do that with regard to conservatives. Alan Dershowitz is not a right winger, but Alan Dershowitz has said to me, this Harvard professor who's very well known, he's lost all his friends because he defended Donald Trump in court. He didn't even vote for Donald Trump. Just merely defending his right to have a defense was enough for him to lose his friends. The assumption on the left is that if you're a conservative, you're a despicable human being. And this is a perfect example. The only reason Dave Rubin would have done it was for money. I don't know anybody on my side of the spectrum who holds their positions because of money. There's a hell of a lot more money on the left anyway.
Really?
That's awesome. Sorry.
It's like I don't accuse anyone on the left for doing it for money. Like, there's no money on the left. Like, I don't know if you.
Well, I've said this before, I think, on the show, but something I think about a lot is last September and October of last year. In October of last year, I did this debate with Charlie Kirk in Phoenix, which the contrast was amazing because a few weeks before that, I was in New York, and while I was in New York, Bhaskar Sankara, the editor of Jacobin, very nicely had showed me around the Jacobin offices, and he got some people together to have a little party on the rooftop, which was all wonderful. But here was the total financial outlay for that party. They ordered a couple of pizzas, and I think there were maybe 3 6-packs of beer that were brought to that. That was that, right? Fast forward to Phoenix, and you go in there and like the Turning Points USA building is its own building. It's not like a floor of it like the Jacobin office. It's got this giant Turning Points USA sign on it, the sliding glass door you go in, the carpets say Turning Points USA on it. The men's room, I remember, had like a Turning Points USA logo on it. They've got this like green room where some people are like offering you fruit platters and stuff, while you wait to talk to Charlie. I've got to say my anecdotal impressions don't line up with what Dennis is expressing there.
Yeah, totally. And I don't congratulate myself or toot my own horn much, but I will in the context of this debate, in that it took a lot. Like I just knew how this conversation was going to go. Like I predicted it enough to have the receipts ready, and I feel like I deserve a lot of credit for that. So I will say that, right? Because these debates always play out the exact same way, right? You'll call them out on something and they just deny. And I'm like, he's going to deny this. He's going to deny that they specifically use people who self-identify as progressive or on the left as their own little political tools to spread propaganda, right? It's just the trick that we see happening over and over again. And I wish the general public, like people who want to engage with political content, were a little more privy to it, so people would stop falling for the same scam literally over and over again. But whatever. I mean, if we have to keep, revealing what the real intentions are, I'll keep doing it. But fact of the matter is, Dave Rubin, I mean, he was the perfect puppet. Like, he didn't really have any strong political ideology. He was just like, I don't know, I tried a bunch of other things that I failed at, so like, let me try to be a news person.
Well, we should give people a little bit of context here, because I know there are people who watch this, who've been watching since TNBS, whatever, know all this, but there are also people who aren't familiar with all this. So could you just indulge us for a second here? About this particular example, because you knew the guy.
Yeah, I knew. I mean, right. So I actually met Dave Rubin back in 2012. It's funny because he came right up to me while I was at work in the office. It was crunch time, and I just remember him being kind of annoying and persistent because I was like prepping the show, and we were getting closer and closer to that deadline. And he was just like, he introduced himself. Obviously, I was polite to him. And then he proceeded to tell me what a huge fan he was, loved TYT, loved the work we're doing. And he was just like, oh, I just feel like you guys are doing something so good. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff happening here. And I was like, okay, great, whatever. And like, he was angling for a job, right? And I was kind of, didn't really care if TYT has the resources to hire him, cool, whatever. But he eventually gets hired, and he was incredibly charming, very persistent in terms of like wanting to develop a friendship with me. And, I fell for it. I totally fell for it. And so he and his now husband would invite me over. We lived in the same neighborhood in West Hollywood. So I would go over like almost every weekend for dinner. And I'm actually, it's embarrassing because I think I'm a pretty good judge of character, but he really did pull a fast one on me. Like, I genuinely thought he was a good guy. But when I think back on it, he wanted to talk about his salary, like constantly. And I remember just telling him, like, hey, I get it. I mean, it's a grind. Working at TYT is a grind. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's still an independent media outlet. We can't work with like 98% of advertisers, right? So we don't really have many corporate advertisers or any advertisers, period. And if we do, it's like some progressive company that like doesn't even really have resources to like sign a contract with us that's like lucrative enough to make a difference. And so I just like try to explain it to him over and over again. And mind you, at this time, he's doing a 30-minute weekly show, and that was it. His husband would produce the entire 30 minutes. Like, Dave didn't even really know what he was talking about. He would just come in and regurgitate what was like prepared for him. But I really bought that he was like not like a leftist, right? But in the very least, like a liberal, and the commentary that he sometimes engaged in, like, made it clear that he found Republicans repulsive. The fact that they hated same-sex marriage, obviously he found that repulsive. And so, we just became close, not based on our political views. We mostly talked about other personal stuff. And I just thought, like, he's charming. I loved his husband. I thought his husband was really smart, really talented, hard worker. TYT wanted to keep him on as a producer, even as Dave Rubin was quitting. And Dave Rubin was like super offended by that, because like when he wanted to leave, my understanding is management was like, okay, no problem. Sayonara. Have a good day. Like, but can we keep David Janet? And he was like really upset about that. But fast forward to literally like a month after he left, all of a sudden he's like talking shit about us. And at first I think it was actually coming from a genuine place, because one thing that Dave Rubin is sincere about and absolutely believes, like to his core, is that Israel should be able to do whatever it wants to Palestinians, should be able to build as many illegal settlements as it wants. He thinks that Palestinians are a threat to Israelis, the existence of Israel. I remember, and this is when we were good friends still, we had an hour-long debate on the show about Israel and its treatment of Palestinians. He was the only person on the panel who sided with the Israeli government. And since I was such a close friend of his, I felt like I couldn't really engage because everyone else was like ganging up on him for good reason. And one of so the former COO of TYT was like furious at like what Dave Rubin was saying. Because at that time, this is in 2014, the number of casualties on the Palestinian side was, I mean, as is always the case when the conflict escalates, just brutal. Like hundreds and hundreds of civilians dead on the Palestinian side. And then there was like a handful of Israeli soldiers who had died in the conflict. And I remember that the Israeli military was specifically targeting like schools and hospitals, knowing full well that there were civilians and children within them. Mm-hmm. And so the COO jumps in, his name was Steve-O, jumps in and is like, okay, like, are you giving them a pass for this? So do you think it's okay for them to bomb a school, even if there's like members of Hamas using that school as like a shield or something? And he said, yes, he thinks it's totally fine. And then later he had us cut that part of the debate out of the final video. And he was adamant about it, which I thought was interesting. He then went on to like Rogan and claimed that we edit our interviews and our debates, which was the furthest thing from the truth. We just do the interviews and we post them as they are.
Unless he should know because he demanded the edit.
Exactly. But anyway, before I know it, I mean, he finally got to what his ultimate dream was, which was at the end of the day, just making a ton of money with as little work as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think the content he puts out there reflects the laziness of just the laziness of the grift as well. I mean, if you're going to be a grifter, like you got to at least come up with decent enough arguments to provide cover for your grift, but he can't even be bothered to do that. It's unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, he bought like a $5 million home in Woodland Hills, California before he had moved to Florida. You don't have the funds for a $5 million home unless you're in bed with right-wing moneyed interests. And I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah. God damn. All right. That is something else. And I would also say, like, look, I generally, most of the time, right, am somebody who, like, lightly pushes back against sort of being quick to call people grifters. I think that it's, like, wildly overused. I think probably most people with horrible views have genuinely talked themselves into them. But, like, in that video that you played, Prager's talking to Rubin. And Prager, who is, I think can only be described as a kind of gross person, as in many ways, and as this sort of very like, big angry grandpa, and he is talking about how happy he is that Dave Rubin is this gay Jewish liberal who will say things that are convenient to the right wing. And Rubin is just, smiling and, whatever. And can we talk about those hellos?
Hello. Yeah, I know, it's super creepy. While holding that cigar, he was feeling himself in that video. And what I really appreciate about Prager is how he really doesn't think anyone does their homework, right? Like, he genuinely didn't think like anyone on the left would come across that video or watch it. I remember actually specifically TMBS covering it when it happened. And it was unforgettable, right? Because it was such a clear admission that Dave Rubin was being used as a tool. It was like an admission to his face. I remember laughing hysterically at Michael Brooks making fun of Dave Rubin, in the context of that clip. And yeah, I mean, I remembered it. I used it against Prager as he lied to our audience about what the reality is. It's just, he's weird. He's as you guys will probably pick up on as we continue talking about the debate, there's something really creepy about him as well. And his weird obsession with taking American culture back to the 1950s. And I'm not talking about the good parts of America, like the golden economic era. I'm talking about the repressive cultural stuff, especially toward women.
Yeah. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.